Greetings and welcome to another episode of Artsy AF Podcast. My name is Andrew Norris, and thank you for being here. My guest this week is Autumn Skye. Autumn is a painter living in British Columbia. Her work is focused around the figure and its interaction with nature. Some would call it visionary art. I would probably call it that. Very beautiful work that is like a breath of fresh air to look at. In this episode, we talk about Autumn's process in making those types of images, how she feels into what the image is going to be. Very intuitive style of making paintings. Autumn talks about her backstory growing up on I believe it was a blueberry and maple syrup farm, and working a job since she was 12 years old, giving her lots of life experience. And when she figured out she was going to be an artist, which is pretty early in the scheme of things. And we get into self-care a lot in this one, which I think is a very evergreen topic for anyone in the creative fields. You gotta take care of that body, take care of your mind. Always an important topic, especially with the flood of technology and information that we're all living in these days. It's good to take a minute and remember to be present. And I know that that's a cliche there, but we get into a lot more than just that in this episode. So it's going to be a good one. Hope you're ready for it. I do have some shout outs this week for my newest Patreon subscribers. Big shouts to Threda Art Collective. And I'm assuming it's Peter Westerman, being the newest Patreon member. Thank you, Pete. And thank you all. It's always nice to have support from artists. And I think that if I had to guess, probably about 95% of the people subscribe to the Patreon are artists, which would make sense, and find it very generous, helpful, and very thankful to all of y'all. And my second newest Patreon subscriber this week is Ned Oliver. Ned sent me a nice message the other day. Really appreciate that, Ned, and I'm glad you're getting inspired from this show. It's really awesome. You can find Ned at MeStashNeebly. I'll put that link in the description. And of course, you can find Peter and Threda at Threda on the gram and on the socials and on the internet, and presumably one day in the Web 3.0 metaverse. Not that meta Facebook crap that they're trying to push. Anyway, I digress. Let's get into this episode. This has been a really long intro. Here is Autumn Skye. Autumn, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Andrew. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, great to see you. And it's nice that we are afforded this technology to be able to communicate over such a long distance.
Yes.
So usually how I kick these things off is I'm always curious about like your origin story and how your life was growing up, whether or not you were a weird kid, things like that. So what can you tell us about your backstory? You can make it as long or as short as you'd like.
Okay. Well, I'd say I'm still a weird kid.
Same.
But yeah, I grew up. I was born in Nova Scotia on the East Coast, and on a maple syrup and blueberry farm, and off the grid completely. Of a very creative and different family. I always used to think, oh, my parents are so weird. And now I look back and I'm like, my parents are so cool.
Yeah.
Really just pioneers, artists, and sort of do-it-yourself kind of people. So we moved all across Canada as my parents split up. We spent time in Ontario and Alberta, and lots of time in the Rockies, in Yoho National Park and Canadian Rockies. And then my mom settled on the coast here. And all the while driving across the country numerous times, which really I feel opened my eyes to the wonder of the natural world, and also just the way that civilization rolls with the countryside, and it changes and subtly adapts, and how people are slightly different but still the same. And I remember studying faces as a very young child, like looking at people and trying to figure out what makes us different and what makes us the same. And everybody has a nose that's basically a nose shape, and eyes that are basically eye shapes, and we all smile in a smile shape. And why are we different, and why are we the same? And so it was really, I remember being fascinated by people, being fascinated by nature. And because my family was quite creative, there's a lot of music and art in my family. I was always supported to make art from my very earliest memories. From my earliest memories, I can remember just having this deep knowing of what I was here to do. And my mom says before I could talk or walk, I was making pictures.
Really?
And just really, they weren't good, mind you. I don't know that I was exceptionally gifted in like some sort of divine prodigy of art, but I was always supported. And so that's where my focus lie.
Nice.
And I'd say that that's the biggest blessing in my life, is that I was never told not to make art. I just was encouraged. We didn't have much money, but there was always art supplies for me. I was never told to stop wasting paper. I was always enabled and encouraged in that way. And as I grew and went to school and then into high school, it was always sort of recognized that, oh, Skye, she's the artist. And people would look to me for that and admire that and compliment it, and opportunities would open because of it. And my high school art teacher was very supportive. He just set my grade at 98% and said, do whatever you want, because he knew that I would do more with less structure. And it was just amazing to feel that support and feel those doors open. And I remember sitting in kindergarten, like vividly sitting there, probably the first week of kindergarten, and the teacher sort of running through the like, blah, 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 this is how it's going to go. So by the time you finish high school, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what your career will be. And then you'll go to college or university, you'll get your career or trade school, and then you work until you're 65, and then you retire. And then you can probably do what you want to do if you want to have a hobby or a craft. And I remember just freaking out inside of like, no, that's wrong. Like, how can you be saying that to us? We're just kids, and that's a terrible deal. Yeah. And so I'm grateful that I never bought into that, and I was never in a family that pushed me into that of like, oh, you got to get a real job.
That's awesome.
My family was full of artists and musicians, and so it was very viable. Yeah. Totally understandable. Like, oh, you want to be an artist? Cool. And it just, to me, I was that. It wasn't like, when I grow up, I'm going to be an artist. It was just like, no, I'm here to make art. That's what I'm doing. Onward.
That's so awesome. That's really cool. Like, there's a couple things I want to talk about from that. First of all, the thing where like adults, I know that they know that, or they don't know that they're doing this, but when they sort of project onto, especially someone in a teaching situation, they sort of project whatever programming they have onto the kids that they're teaching or that they're watching over. And I just find that weird, because I never knew that was the case until I was much older, like a full-grown adult myself. I was like, oh, not everyone, but I'd say many people do that often, right? Like, oh yeah, they're like, this is how it is, and I'm just going to keep repeating it because that's how I've been told it is, and so therefore that must be how it is because there's a consensus and we all want to do this thing. And I think it's really cool.
And they're in a position of sorry.
No, go for it.
They're in a position of authority, so we're like, oh, okay, that's how it is.
Yeah.
Right?
I believed adults like just random adults up until I was like 15 or 16. I was like, they must know more. They're older. And it's just weird how like you and I have very different sort of paths towards the same thing that we're doing. And we're making different art, obviously, but I just find it endlessly fascinating about people's backgrounds and what led them to, you know, to be themselves, to be that creator that they have inside them. And it seems like you were just kind of born that way. Plus, you had really rad parents. Do you remember ever like deciding like, okay, you may have already answered this, but were you like, I am going to be a painter, or was it? Did you ever have any other interests at all?
I have a lot of interests, actually. Yeah, there was music has always been a big part of my life, singing and writing songs and playing guitar. I've always loved to cook and sew, and I've produced many events and been a community gatherer. And yeah, so I like sculpture. I like a lot of different things. I make jewelry.
Gotcha.
So I think in high school, actually, I thought, I was like, okay, if I want to be strategic here about a career, music is almost as big of a passion as art. So maybe I should go into music. Old and frumpy, I'll become an artist. So that was it seemed like maybe that was going to be a timeline that I would, that would be logical to me, and make sense as far as industry standards.
Right.
But it just sort of didn't happen like that. I thought, oh, maybe I'll go to Japan and be a lounge singer and sing jazz standards for 10 years, and then I can retire or something like that. Or I'll try to get a record deal or something like that. But art always just made its way forward in my priority. And I did 1 year of art college, and then thought it wasn't for me at all. It seemed so silly. And so I ended up instead painting sets for movies in Broadway for a year.
Oh, nice.
And learned so much there as far as efficiency and effective painting strategies. And then just started traveling. I opened a restaurant for a few years.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, actually, since I was 12-ish, I always wanted to have a restaurant.
Yeah.
And my poor friend Tessa, she would be like, come over, maybe we're going to build a fort or do something cool. And I'm like, do you want to play restaurant? And I would have floor plans drawn up, and we would design the menu, and I'd cook lunch. And so I always sort of had this idea in my mind of it'd be cool to have a restaurant.
Yeah.
And after traveling for a few years, I came back to BC for a summer and met a man who became my partner at the time, and his friend who had just moved to the little town where I went to high school here, Powell River. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh yeah, me and my friend Corey were just going to open a little music and arts cafe. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I got lots of ideas about that. Mm-hmm. And then a month later, they asked me to be a partner. And so the three of us, I was sort of that missing key of the aesthetics.
Yeah.
They had sort of like the books on one side and then the music on the other side. And they didn't have any idea how restaurants actually ran. Yeah. And I'd worked as a server for 12 years and bartended and done events. And so it really made sense. And so we had that for almost 4 years, and it was great. It was, we grew a lot of our own produce. We had movie nights and poetry nights and live open mic nights and DJ nights and bands, and we catered and we did lots of crazy stuff. It was I consider it like it cost the same amount as university. I learned way more, and I had way more fun, and it helped the community in lots of ways too. So it, you don't go into restaurants to make money by any means.
Right.
But it was a good experience, and it had its ups and downs. And throughout that time, actually, one of the big blessings of it besides the ripple effect in the community of just creative empowerment and gathering, was that I had these walls that needed art on them. And there were dips in how busy we were. So I was able to just paint when I would just paint in the restaurant when I wasn't working or when there wasn't many people in the restaurant. So in between serving tables.
This is like a mural style thing. You're painting on the walls?
No, I was painting on canvases and then hanging them. And so I was learning about exhibition, about how to talk about my art, how to give and receive criticism and feedback. And, people would come in, they didn't know I was the artist. So I'd get to hear these sort of uncensored opinions and then also bringing other artists in. So it really showed me a lot about how to hang art and it was in a way an art gallery, which was great. And throughout those 4 years, my art continued to sustain me and actually support the cafe as well. So it really, by opening the restaurant, I quit my bartending job. It sort of forced me into this free fall surrender into my art business without realizing it. And then a couple of years went by before I realized that, wow, I've been supporting myself and my partner and this business all on my art. And then once I rid myself of the other two, then I was able to travel and just thrive more and more from my art.
So about how old were you when all this was happening? Like
I was 21 when I opened the cafe.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's epic.
Yeah. I'm like, wow, 21. That's like, I was just a wee baby, but I guess.
Well, you had your focus right. It seems like you had that correct. You were looking the right way, and I mean, it may have to do with your upbringing in terms of like just sort of learning how to live off the land. It sounds like, right? That's how you grew up.
I think a lot of it too is I had a lot of work experience at that point because our family didn't have a lot of money. As of 12, every summer I worked full time, and I started waitressing when I was 12, just sort of under the table because luckily I same height since I was 12 years old, and I appeared older and was more mature than maybe a lot of 12-year-olds. And so I worked and I hustled for it. And because if I wanted cool new clothes or CDs, I had an epic CD collection or new art supplies, I had to buy those myself. And so it motivated me. Art to work meant freedom. And so then once I got a car too, it was just like freedom. And so by the time I was in the restaurant, once I opened my own, at that point I had already been serving for 10 years. And I had a lot of experience around working. I knew what work ethic was. And yeah. So.
Do you think that like our cultural standard in terms of like, it might be different per individual, but do you think our cultural standard of like, you can't work until you're at least 16 years old, do you think that that's a little off? I mean, I know it's good for some jobs because like, obviously you don't want little boys going out trying to do like crazy manual labor or like going off on a like fishing expedition or anything like that. But what are your thoughts on that? Just curious.
That's a good question. I'd say it's sort of a mix, really, because on one hand, I think kids should just be kids and be intuitive, creative beings as long as possible. On the other hand, I think that it's good to work a number of different jobs before you spend $50,000 on college or university and get in debt for a career that you might not even want. So I think work experience is vital to sort of learning about ourselves and learning about an industry that we may or may not want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like, there's so much emphasis put on working and jobs and so it's wrapped up in capitalism and the further enslavement of the Western world. or the world at large.
Yeah.
So it's mixed. It's sort of like an apple or the egg, or sort of the chicken or the egg kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is what, we've created this system, so we need to work, but is that really our truest essence? Is that really our highest priority? Is like having job security?
Right.
It is, but why? And is it necessary? I don't know.
Right.
So yeah, I think having kids have the opportunity to play at different careers is really important, and opportunities for that in a safe environment. I have a couple friends who were unschooled, so like beyond homeschool, right? Where it's just like, oh, you're interested in horses? Okay, here's horseback riding lessons. Oh, you're interested in mechanics? Okay, help dad rebuild the car.
Yeah.
Or like that kind of thing. And these two people are literally the smartest people I know.
Yeah.
Like genius, know so much about so many different things, have experienced and traveled and done things and worked many jobs. So there's something to that, rather than just like learning to sit down and shut up and be educated so you can work in a factory or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, and that's why the modern like schooling system was created, to sort of get people accustomed to going to a factory job, right? Like in terms of like the Industrial Revolution, that's what the people who created the modern public schooling system had in mind. Was like, oh, we need these people to like be able to run things in this factory. Yeah, I mean, there's so much.
Answer to bells.
Yeah. Yeah, but I that's kind of what sparked it, is like you had all this experience as like a young preteen and teenager, and I think a lot of life is figuring out what you don't want or what doesn't vibe with you, so that you, for me at least, I mean it's different for everyone, but I've had and still do have so many interests that I have to try them. I don't have to, but I have tried a lot of them out before realizing that, like, just kind of figuring out and deconstructing this whole program we're in, from the schools to being in debt at university to getting a job that you may or may not like, and then just like putting your head down because that's the thing you're supposed to do. I think that like there are, like you said, there are some benefits to playing at a career as a young person. But yeah, that's why I asked that question. It just seemed interesting to me. So you kind of wrap up this restaurant gig. Did you guys close, or did you just kind of step away?
Yeah, it was sort of a perfect storm of out of money, out of energy, and our relationship ended. And so it was just very tumultuous, and it had run its course.
And what happened after that?
So after that, I had quite a few paintings, and I had some clients who had a few of my pieces, and I had a meeting with them one day, and I happened to have like 10 paintings in my car, just on my way passing their house. We're like, oh, it's stuff for tea. Okay, that's great. Oh, let's see what you got. And I pulled all these paintings out, and they're like, okay, we'll take that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one. And they bought 6 paintings. I was like, okay. So awesome. I all of a sudden had freedom and time and a good chunk of money. So I went to Europe for a month.
Nice.
And then I went to Hawaii for 3 months. My friend was going to massage therapy school on Maui, and she said, oh, Skye, you'd love it here. It's so beautiful. And so I was like, all right, I'll come. So I hopped on a plane and I went, and I just took my art supplies and I just painted. I rented a little room and just painted nonstop for 3 months, had a little art show at the end of it. And it just totally nourished me and sort of reset me, my nervous system and my heart, and was so valuable. And while I was there, I was walking down the street and I saw this poster stapled to a telephone pole that was like, the meaning of the universe and sacred geometry and where the origins of where we all come from and the grand unification theory.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for a Jamie Janover presentation of Nassim Haramein's work in the grand unification theory. And I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. I'd never heard of it. I went to this
What year
talk.
was this?
This was 2009.
Okay, nice.
So I went to the talk and it blew my mind. And Jamie said, oh, I'm doing a music show tomorrow night for anybody that's interested. So I went to this music show, which also was just awesome. It was Lynx and Janover when they were playing together.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Jamie after, because it's just a little show. It was very intimate and lovely. And he was so kind. And I said, Jamie, that just blew my mind last night. And I feel like I've been drawing sacred geometry my whole life. And I just didn't know what it was. And now I have these tools in my tool belt that I can actually interpret the geometry in a new way. And it feels like it's just opened so much of the world to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this idea percolating for a few years leading up to that. This idea that I thought was my own, that I was like, oh, imagine there's a band or a DJ playing, and then there's an artist on stage with them interpreting it visually, so the audience has like a visual anchor to witness while they go on this musical journey. So I told him about it. I said, I have this idea, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. He's like, oh yeah, well, there's a festival next weekend. You should talk to Phil right here, and Alex and Alison Gray are going to be there, and yeah, you should totally come out and live paint. I'm like, oh, live paint, that's a thing, okay. And Phil was like, yeah, come on out. So all of a sudden I was thrust onto stage next to Alex and Alison. And
Wow.
at that event, I met so much of, I met Amanda Sage and so many of now my dear visionary family and so much of the festival community. And I asked Jamie after, I said, what else? That was awesome. What else would you recommend as far as festivals? And he listed off Symbiosis, Beloved, LIB, all these festivals. And so I came back to BC. I got a van and I started going to festivals and went to Symbiosis in 2009. And it opened whole new worlds for me of community and family and creative expression and events and creative play. And then it's just evolved from there of traveling every year multiple times and teaching and being part of this greater collective that's growing all the time. It's like every day I discover a new painter who's sort of an up and coming visionary artist. It's so exciting to see that community continue to grow.
Yeah, that's kind of the impetus for this podcast, really. It's like such a large community, such a large scene. So many, and here in Colorado where I live, so many artists have moved here in the past. I mean, I came here in 2012 and I was like, wow, there are a lot of artsy people here. And now it's just, there are so many painters, so many musicians, dancers, just every kind of creative person in the sort of larger music and arts festival world seems to have moved here. And I really just kind of wanted to sort of shed a light and get sort of the contours of this movement on record, I guess. I have one question though about the story you just told. The first time you live painted and you were next to Allison and Alex Gray, did you know them at the time? Did you know of them, of their work?
I had the Mission of Art book. And so I knew vaguely who they were. I didn't realize they were such a big deal. I just knew, I knew that they were artists, and I really liked Alex's book, and they were very kind and welcoming and supportive to me. And maybe it was to my benefit that I didn't really
Right.
realize that it was such an honor, and so I was chill.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't,
You didn't
you know,
fangirl.
totally fan them
Yeah.
and freak out. So yeah.
Nice. Um, so what kind of we sort of you sort of touched on like when you were younger, working in a restaurant and having a job since you were 12, and you said that your parents split up, but I'm also curious, like maybe what other obstacles or friction have you met along the path in terms of like wanting to be an artist?
Good question. Um, Not a lot,
Yeah.
honestly. I started doing like Christmas craft fairs and spring craft fairs when I was 13,
Hmm.
and so I've been selling my paintings and selling my crafts since then.
That's
So
so
it just
great.
really happened naturally. I would tried all different things. I was making purses out of old silk neckties, and I had a Dremel tool, so I was dremeling wine glasses, and people would hire me to do like wedding gifts with their names and the dates,
Whoa.
and then hand painting greeting cards and making little ornaments, and always trying new things, and button bracelets and all these things. So I've just been experimenting, and if things don't work, then I just try something else. And um, people talk a lot about art being right side and business being left side of your brain, and how artists are innately bad at business and woe is they, and just the starving artist mentality is like a self-perpetuating myth that
Yeah.
just is reality, because we tell ourselves this story that artists are bad at business. But I totally disagree. I think that business is very creative. You
Hmm.
have to be creative about products, about marketing, about promotion, and merchandising, and talking to people, about forging relationships. You can even be creative with your taxes, but that's a little bit more left brain.
Yeah, yeah.
But most of it is right brain, and I like this whole like left wing, right wing thing. It's like always these polarizing, and I really for the last quite a few years I've really been meditating on paradox and on
Nice.
balance, and about like everything you do in the world is very important. In fact, it's so important that it's like on a grand cosmic level. You are vital to the evolution of the stars and God. And we're just a tiny speck on a tiny speck hurtling through space. It's
Yeah.
not that big a deal. Don't
Right.
worry about it. We're over. It's gone in the blink of an eye.
Right.
And like, so what, you have a zit, or so what, you like broke your favorite mug or something.
Right.
Like, it's just so meaningless. And so both of those, that like awe for the cosmos and the nihilism, it's both are true.
Hmm.
And so like, where do you need to find your balance point? That swirling balance point of take things really seriously, don't take them seriously at all. What's your medicine in this moment? It's always going to be different. It always is not 50-50 ever.
Right.
It's always going to be an ebb and flow of ratios, but they're both true always simultaneously. And so I think this like art and business, it's all the same thing. And we keep thinking this left brain, right brain, masculine, feminine, output, intake is that they're at odds, but really they're a dance that is absolutely vital
Right.
to everything around us and to our own existence. It's the in breath, the out breath. We can't live just breathing in or just breathing out. It's impossible. The heart has to pump as well. It's just this paradox
Yeah.
of a dance.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much to talk about there. Like the whole duality thing. It's always seemed like a trap to me, but then I'll catch myself in that trap, which is funny language to use, like catching myself. But I'll notice myself. uh, in the trap of being like on this side, like, yo, I'm on this side, and to hell with that side. And then a couple days later, I'll be like, I've kind of changed my mind on that, and
Mm-hmm.
so I've tried to, and I hope that this may be what an artist is cultivating that openness to sort of do that dance, that weave, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
touch both those sides when you need to, or walk that line as much as you can, you know, going back and forth. But
Well,
yeah, it's like separating business and art is kind of a lot like, you know, saying, are you a Democrat or a Republican? Are you
exactly.
science or are you religion? And I think that, like, those dichotomies are reinforced by not just people in power, but I think that may just be how the default human mind is set up, right?
Mm.
But I think it's kind of ridiculous to ask someone to choose and stay in that box or stay on that side, because I don't know, there's so many different ways to look at anything.
Yeah. Well, everything we do takes multiple facets of ourselves. You say, like, maybe the artist's place, and the artist actually is made possible by living in that balance point. And I think that's that's absolutely true. That's the crux of it, is that the artist has to live in both the masculine, feminine, or like the analytical and intuitive simultaneously in that balance point again, which might be, 30% intuitive right now and
Mm-hmm.
70% analytical, or maybe it's completely to the other spectrum.
Yeah.
But it has to be both, because it takes a lot of discipline to sit in front of a canvas and bring a vision into fruition.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like thrilling, glamorous, dramatic work with like symphonies playing behind you and cool, moody camera angles.
Yeah.
And, it's not like we see in the movies where it's just like chain smoking and like drinking. You gotta, everybody has their own vices, but
Right.
you gotta show up and do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And the clearer and the better rested and the better fed that you are, the more effective you are to do that work.
100%.
And you have to also surrender to the inspiration that's flowing through. Otherwise, you're just going to be showing up in front of the canvas, sitting there with your arms crossed, saying, I don't have any ideas. Like,
Yeah.
or it's going to just be soulless. And so it has to be both. We have to put our logical, focused, driven mind, our left side of our brain, or our masculine, or our, maybe it's our in-breath, or whatever it is. We put that part of ourselves in service to the receptive, feminine, intuitive inspiration that flows through.
Mm-hmm.
And so we listen, but we also act. And it's always this dance of in, out, in, out. And it's because, man, if we sit around waiting for inspiration, we're
Never
just
gonna
going to
come.
keep sitting there.
Yeah.
Like Picasso says, and I say this a lot, Picasso said, inspiration does exist, but it must find you working.
Yep.
And it's such a key. People say, where do your ideas come from? You probably get it as an artist, right? It's like the
100%.
most common question is, how long did it take and where do your ideas come from?
Yeah.
And my answer to where do your ideas come from is they come through when I'm working.
Yeah.
So most of my concepts, most of my epiphanies and ideas come not when I'm grumbling at the canvas from across the room, though that sometimes can, but it comes when I'm actually in the act. So maybe I'm in the act of cooking or dancing or making music, but usually painting.
Mm-hmm.
The ideas will come. And so I have my sketchbook next to me, I write them down, back to work. And it's that listening, that receptivity, that's like, I think of it as like an open channel. It's if we're a channel, we're a faucet.
Mm-hmm.
that funnels the divine inspiration of the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
into our unique faucet shape, whatever the Andrew shape of
Our
your
biology.
channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of it, like the cake icing tube.
Yeah.
And we're all like the different nozzles on the end of the cake icing tube. And it's all just icing flowing through, but it comes through in different shapes depending on your unique perspective and story. And so if you clog that little nozzle up, being ourselves, with expectations and fears and demands and procrastination and perfectionism, then we just get all bunged up, just gets all crusty and constipated in there.
We don't need that. We just need icing. That's all we
just
need.
need icing. But sometimes you need to flush a little thinner icing through. So sometimes like people say, what do you do about artist blocks? And I say, make art.
Yeah.
Like, stop believing in it. Stop giving it power over you. Make art. Even if it's just crappy, in fact, especially if it's just a mess. So if you're feeling bunged up creatively, get a piece of cardboard out from the recycle and get some crayons from your kid or a piece of charcoal from the fire and start scribbling. Start making a mess, or draw on the driveway, or sculpt in the sand on the beach, or do something, dance, get your body involved, do something that just loosens you up. And then, because if you have an artist block and you put you're like, okay, I'm going to get through this artist block, and you pull out a fresh new canvas and you unwrap it and it's just pristine, and you put it on your easel there and squeeze all the fresh colors of paint out. That is the most terrifying thing you can possibly do
100%.
To get through an artist block.
Yeah.
Don't do that. That's madness, because you don't want to mess up a perfect canvas with your humble, expressions.
Right.
You got to get out of the way.
Get messy.
And get the divine flowing through you, so the divine can mess up that canvas.
I like that. I like that a lot. So I'm glad that we started talking about that, because I did want to ask you about your process, because I know a lot of people listening to this will be curious about that. And you sort of answered my question, but do you ever come to the canvas with a preformed idea or something that you want to express or want to say?
Definitely.
Yeah.
But I have to hold it lightly, because there's always surprises along the way. And I rarely come with an idea that's completely fleshed out in my mind's eye. Usually it's the seed of an idea and it takes me on a journey.
Yeah.
Or it might be just one color or figure or animal or something. Maybe it's an overall shape of the composition that I want to play with, and I then can structure my elements around that. But even if it is a pretty developed idea, I have to be willing to throw it all out the window in service to the painting and in service to the inspiration. And sometimes I'll follow the rabbit hole of an idea super far and put days or weeks into something, only to suddenly come to this moment of true knowing that I have to paint over that.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that too, because I think when we met, it was a couple summers ago up at Cosm, and you were painting, I forget the title of it. I could sneak the title, but you were painting that woman with all the birds.
Wild Abandon.
Yeah, and I think she had some birds at the time, but also like roses as well. Am I remembering that correctly?
There was two paintings. I was painting one of Mary Magdalene holding the baby with all the roses.
Okay.
That was probably next to me. And then same model, actually. My friend Indy, that's in both of them.
Okay.
And then the one with the birds was the one that I started live at that solstice or equinox event.
Yeah, I think it was the solstice.
That was, it was the solstice. You're right. Yeah, it was in June. And so the one with the birds, I started live that night with the other one sitting next to me.
Got you. Well, anyway, the bird painting, Wild Abandon, it seems like that went through a bunch of iterations. Am I correct? Or Am I misremembering that? I could definitely be misremembering that. My memory's not that great.
They all do go through a bunch of iterations. And actually, even at the end of that night, I only had a few of the birds in there, and it was very splashy and open and like painterly. And I remember thinking, ooh, maybe I should just say it's finished. Like, I really like where it's at right now.
Yeah.
But it just felt right to keep going on it. And then, of course, you know, I have this this craving for painterly, loose brushstrokes in my work. But then I just get in there and I refine every square inch and just smother myself in detail. I can't help it. It's just, I don't know whether it's anal retentiveness or whether it's just, you know, my style or the way that inspiration flows through me. I just paint until the painting says it's finished.
Yeah.
But that one, it had this like looseness and like drips. I love drips. And
yeah.
But I just kept going, and it got super refined in every square inch.
Well, so I found this the video, the Art as My Teacher, Art is a Teacher on YouTube. It's on your YouTube page, which is Autumn Skye Art, for anyone curious. I wanted to share the screen real quick and kind of give people an idea of like what I'm going to mute the video, and I do want to get to the poem that Art is a Teacher later. But in the video, we have a painting of yours that goes through so many iterations here. And
are you thinking of the healing one? Is it called Healing? And it goes through a woman who has cracked. She like is bald with a cracked head.
Yeah.
So you can go through that whole painting. Is actually a separate video on YouTube there that's called Healing, and it's 1 minute and 20 seconds, and it goes through 1,300 different images.
Whoa.
Okay. That's to anybody
perfect,
who's going to like go to my YouTube, just know that I haven't uploaded anything new in a long time, and I'm sort of embarrassed about my channel. But any second now, I'm gonna.
No, I mean, I'm always surprised sometimes. Not always. Sometimes I'm surprised when I find an artist has a YouTube channel at all, and I'm always like pleasantly surprised. I'm like, okay, this will help a little bit with my research. So thank you for cluing me into that, which is this will be much better content, I guess. Okay, here we go. Share screen, and we'll share this one. Okay, do you see the YouTube page there? Just want to confirm. Okay, sweet.
Yeah, so I did this for the Bloom.
Oh yeah,
the documentary series.
I remember.
And they gave me the theme of healing, and I thought healing is a journey.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was curious about this painting in particular, just because these small clip I saw on the other video was so. I mean, it's so drastically. I mean, if you're seeing.
So I treated.
Yeah, go ahead.
I specifically treated this one more like an animation. This I'd say this isn't totally typical, though sometimes it can be very drastic when I change my mind, and that's why I like working in acrylic paint.
Yeah.
But this one I wanted it to animate the journey of healing, rather than just be a time lapse of painting a completed piece.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And you might recognize that painting. So
yeah, 100%.
You know, it's it was very fun, and usually I try to watch it on like a half speed because it's 100 hours of painting, 1,300 photos in a minute, or like 25 seconds or something like that. What is it? Yeah, 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is
it's very fast.
That is just epic. And I guess so. I think the point that I'm trying to get to in this line of questioning is like, what are you? I even had trouble like trying to write this down, but where's not the right word. How do you listen? How do you see through to make those kinds of decisions? You know, when you're like, I need to paint over this third of the painting, and I don't know what's going to go here, but I know that this is not what I like. And I noticed in that one, I mean, you started so light. You started like so thin with the paint.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to imagine that helps a lot in terms of like technicality, like being able to paint over something.
Yeah, definitely painting. I paint typically in very thin layers of paint, so I can get drastic and usually not see what's underneath showing through in texture. Sometimes I have to get a little sandpaper out, but it's pretty minimal. So yeah, on a technical level, that does help. And like I said, painting in acrylic is very helpful for being spontaneous and intuitive around my decision making. But as far as, yeah, it's a really good question. How do I listen? I think it's body centric. Like if I really feel into it, it's around my solar plexus, gut, and heart that it just feels right, like gut instincts. And sometimes I'll argue with it and say, oh man, no, I just spent like 3 days painting that. And it just, and it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And you have to keep showing up and not be precious about things. Like I have an older painting that I did in Costa Rica. I started at Envision, and it's called Pura Vida. It's got like 60 animals, Costa Rican animals, all swirling, and this woman rising up out of the jungle. And there's a rainbow macaw in that over her head that I literally painted till finished 3 times. Because each time I thought, oh no, it has to be a little higher. It has to have more of like a feeling of levity and less like a headdress, like bird stuck to her head.
Yeah.
And so I moved it by 2 inches, repainted it, glazed it, got it all nice. Oh no, it has to move again. And so part of that I would chalk up to me maybe not planning that much. Like when I did do art college, they would always I did the 1 year, and they would always make you hand in your thumbnail drawings and your color studies and everything with your painting.
Yeah.
And I was like, screw that. That's not how I work. I would do all that after and hand it in and be like, yes, this is my planning phase, because I paint so intuitively. So I really rebelled against that. And I feel like now I'm coming into the point that's a balance between the two, because I see, especially when I'm live painting, I see there's like a little bit of planning is helpful. I used to just arrive, like for many years, I would just arrive with a blank canvas, no idea. Like,
same.
I wonder what I should paint.
Yeah.
And it would just take me on a journey. And now I'm like, oh, okay, I see that actually just like bringing a couple reference photos, maybe like drop that plumb line of the center of the canvas down the canvas first. Yeah. That's going to help. Like I painted this like Beloved piece. It was my first year at Beloved. It's a man and a woman looking at each other with lots of designs around it. Older piece. And I painted it, and I happened to be standing. It was before they built the painters stage. So they just had us all on this slope. And I was standing on an angle, and my easel was on an angle, and the whole painting was off, like the axis, the like straight vertical axis of the painting was off by 2 inches. Oh man. So when I framed it, I had to have it restretched and straightened. It was so funny. So yeah, just that kind of thing. Like just measure it. If it's a central composition, just measure the composition. Anyways, I got distracted from your question. Your question was, how do I listen? And yeah, it's centered in my body, and it's a knowing that my mind can't talk me out of.
Yeah.
So there is the logic involved. Sometimes like it is like, oh, I feel that macaw does need to be a little higher because of all these logical reasons, but it's also a knowing. And I think it's the knowing that motivates the surrender of the saying, okay, I'll just continue to keep showing up and doing the work and be willing to, for the sake of the painting. The painting deserves it. And in the grand scheme of things, blink of an eye, 10 years goes by. Like, how is it almost 2022? It's so weird. So anyways, like in the grand scheme of things, and if I can spend however many hours zoning out to like mediocre Netflix shows, then surely I can spend a few hours in service to something that I'm carving out of nothingness to share with who knows how many people. So I think that really, like, we in this society, in this day and age, we're very seduced by the like instantaneous nature of like, you can call ahead to McDonald's and they'll have your food ready for you. Not that I would say eat at McDonald's ever, but
we don't
like
condone
we're just so like, and now they're like, ooh, 5G, you can download a movie in 3 seconds. I'm like, why do we need that? It's not necessary. It's okay to like plan ahead and download a movie a little slower. It's really, at what cost are we expediting all of these processes? Like the fact that you can order one ball bearing from Amazon and it'll be on your doorstep within 2 days is just madness. It's madness.
Yeah. Just because we can doesn't mean that we should, right?
Yeah, it's just, we don't need to operate in this quick. So I think that in that process of like getting seduced and getting used to how instant things can be, we've lost a lot of our willingness to stay with a process. And when I teach, that's so much what it comes to, is like just like, the Dory from Finding Nemo, just keep on swimming, just keep on painting. Like you just have to do the work. There's no, if you want realism or if you want detailed fractals exploding out of, a sunflower, there's no quick fix for that.
That's
sure,
right.
There's some clone brushes on Photoshop if you want to move to digital, but even that's not instant. You have to, if you really want to do service to the art you're creating, you have to be willing to do the work. And sometimes that work is annoying and boring and tedious.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you got to do that work again to fix things. And it's okay. It's all worth it. Because you look at a painting, you never look at a painting that you finished on the wall, framed, and think, I wish I spent a little less time on that painting.
Right.
Or I wish I didn't take those creative risks with that. Well, maybe, there are detours you can take in paintings, but it's always in service to something greater. And so listening to that feeling of the signposts of your gut or the signpost of your solar plexus or heart that will help steer you towards that greater fruition of your work is so key. If you know about kinesiology and muscle testing,
I don't.
You ever explored that?
I've
so
heard
there's
of
a lot of different ways of muscle.
Yeah.
So it's like the wisdom of it's like body wisdom. It's like wisdom of your muscles. And so like a lot of holistic doctors will get you to hold supplements to your chest, and you hold out your arm and they push down your arm and it'll tell you whether it's a medicine or not to you. It's like trusting sort of your subconscious and your body. There's other ways, like you can try to push your fingers apart by making true or false statements. You can lift your fingers off your chest. You can lean forward and back. There's a lot of different ways. To me, having somebody else push down on my arm feels like my bias is arguing against their bias. That feels way too nebulous to me. So the way that I've done it for probably 15 years now is I use an object that's between 5 and 10 pounds, something that you can lift straight out from your body, that gives resistance to your muscles, but it's not going to tire you out in 3 lifts. So something that just feels like, okay, I can feel my muscles engaging here quite a bit, but not super heavy. And then make sure you're well hydrated, and then just make statements. Like I always start with my name, just so I can get a feel for the weight. My name is Autumn Skye, lift. My name is Janine Salzbrig, lift. And you can literally feel the difference in weight when you make these trips. It's in my highest good that I go on this trip to New Zealand, lift. It's not in my highest good. So I've used it for big decisions. I've used it for like partnerships and for businesses and for trips and business moves. It's really, I've really learned to use it and trust it because you can feel the difference. There's no bias there. You can literally feel the difference. And the more that I've used that, the more I can feel that in my body. Just by thinking thoughts, I can feel it filling me or draining me, because it, on a very like on a quantum physics level or on a kinesiology, like science backed level. It's you're physically depleting your body of chi. It's like if a lot of traditions believe in this life force that fills us, and
Right.
that's why it's so imperative, especially in these wacky times that we're in, that we keep our minds in check and keep our self-talk in check. The kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
self-talk that we give ourselves, and then we wonder why we feel so drained. It's magic, but it's very tangible, effective magic. And so the more you can get to know that feeling and use it, I encourage you. I've found things in my house using this, like it's upstairs. No, it's downstairs. Okay, it's downstairs. And like narrowing it down. And I always double check it, like cross-reference it of it. I say the positive and then I say the negative version, and it's fascinating. So I think that it's a similar feeling when I'm working with my paintings, and just like the thoughts come and I'm like, oh, that feels good. Like it just fills my body with like this knowing yes.
Right.
And
yeah. I was actually going to ask you, okay, how do you listen? But then like, how do you get in touch with your body? Right. And that's, and you just, you precognized my question there.
Perfect.
Another, like, I think that maybe it's modern society, maybe it's just the way the human mind can sort of take over the body in a certain way, but I think that we have trouble feeling, like physically feeling things or noticing when we're feeling one way or the other. And now it's like, multiplied by tons of distraction with these, it's kind of like weaponized distraction at this point, really. But I think if we could actually like feel what we're doing to our bodies, we would change our behavior, And for me, like the way that I try and stay in touch with that is like exercise, yoga, meditating. And I don't do all three of those every single day, but just like enough to be like, oh, here I am. Like, how does this feel when I do the dishes? Oh, great. Like in my mind, I was like, I don't want to, or whatever it is, chore or something that in my mind is like, quote unquote, I don't want to do this. We should go paint or whatever. There's this thing about these small victories where you kind of chop down things on the to-do list and make your environment like a more orderly or clean place. And it doesn't have to be like fascistically orderly or anything like that, but you know what I mean? Like there's things that we have to do every day. And then once I do the proverbial dishes, I notice that I feel better, I feel lighter, I'm more focused when I do step up to the easel later down the line. But yeah, I think that being able to feel things is super important. It's that going back to that duality thing again. If I would venture to say that most people we're stuck in our minds like most of the time. But yeah, thank you for those insights there. That was great. So what's it called again for people who are wondering?
Muscle testing.
Muscle testing. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different forms, like I said, but the one that I've really come to is that lifting technique, because there's no bias there. As long as the weight is good for your strength level, it's like something that's comfortable to hold. Sometimes I'll use like my basket with my water bottle, sketchbook in it, or it'd be interesting for me to actually weigh the thing that feels right, because I always grab different things. Like I'll be in the grocery store and I'll use my purse or something.
Yeah.
Be like at a stoplight and I'll use my basket next to me in the car seat. And so, but yeah, it's such a good tool. And it's like you say, it's getting in touch with our feelings. And I think, again, here's that paradox, is that we're so often stuck in our mind, as you said. I think we're also stuck in our feelings.
Yeah, 100%.
But in a way that it's overwhelming,
yeah.
or we're being ruled by it, or we don't know how to channel it, or we want to numb it.
Yeah.
And so much of our MO these days is through coping. Just, just like binge watch some shows or eat, like it's such a strange time to be alive. It's so exciting and so strange and so scary in all of those things all at the same time. And it's easy to get apathetic. And in that apathy, we stop listening. I think a lot of the time we just say, "Oh, screw it. I'll just eat the thing that I know is going to give me comfort in the short term, but make me suffer in the long term. And then I'll take a Tylenol, or I'll take some like antacids or something like that to then cope with the feelings of my body giving me the signals that this is not a medicine to me, or that this is actually a poison." And, it's like, oh, I'm sitting at my computer and I'm hunched over, my posture is terrible. Or, as we all know, as painters, like we all sit upstairs. Oh, did you say posture?
Someone say posture. You said that.
Now, when I'm taking a photo, instead of saying cheese, I say posture. And everybody just
brilliant.
So yeah, instead of like you say, like doing yoga, or I paint on a yoga ball a lot of the time, and that really helps my posture.
Nice.
Helps the fluidity of my spine. But instead of listening to my body that says, "Oh, my back hurts from sitting this way, I should stretch it out, or I should change, I should raise." Like yesterday I was painting for hours on this piece, and I should have just moved my easel up 3.5 inches. But instead I was working on the lower part of the canvas, and I was just having to do this like crouch thing. And I'm looking over now at my stool, and I'm like, oh, actually it's on a hydraulic. I could have moved my stool down. But you're so in the flow that you're not really listening. Like, you can hear your body, you can hear it saying ouch or no. But we just keep on going through, and then later, you might feel like you're going to take some painkillers, which I didn't, and I don't typically, but it's so easy to just put a Band-Aid on it instead of truly listening what the deeper signal is. And I think so much of what we're dealing with in our society right now is topical Band-Aids.
Yeah.
And not truly going to the root. And I know it's very like idealistic and vague to say that, but I truly believe that we're not, it's like going to the doctor and saying, "Oh, my hip hurts." And he says, "Oh, well, here's some painkillers," or something, instead of like, "Oh, actually your knee is out of place, or your ankle, or your shoulder." Like, this holistic approach to society, this holistic approach to our art making. It's all, we have to look at so many different avenues, I think, to get a bigger picture.
100% agree. And, not to discount the mind, because it can be pretty powerful and pretty spot on if you know when to listen to it, I guess. Sometimes it's just yammering at you about some discursive BS, but sometimes you'll have like one of those sharp insights. It's like I've been trying to get into the practice of like writing stuff down. And I honestly think that it's made me a more fluent speaker, and this whole project is kind of maybe in some way is like teaching me how to speak. But anyway, I wanted to get back to this. This dovetails nicely. What kind of, do you have like any routines or rituals or habits that you do before you paint? Like, what's a typical day look like for you?
I would love to say that I paint 9 to 5, 5 days a week. But the truth is, sometimes a couple weeks goes by that I don't paint, and then there might be a couple weeks that I paint 15 hours a day. It really sort of ebbs and flows. And I think that that's part of the blessing and the curse of being self-employed, is that it can simultaneously take up all your time, all your waking hours, And it can also be sidelined or put on the back burner in service of family, business, community obligations, various things, chores. It's just easy to let it go down the priority list because it's, you don't have a boss. The boss is
you.
Is you or your inspiration, or that innate drive to create art. But it's easy to distract from that. But I also, for the last year, I've been in the process of building my new studio, which this is my first podcast interview in my new studio. It's so exciting.
Awesome. Nice.
And so it's been exactly a year. And for the last week, I've been painting in here. There's still a few boxes around here and there, but for the most part, the art is hung. The shelves are stocked. I've got hot running water. Oh. And it's such a beautiful space. And so to be able to bring students here instead of traveling so much is sort of my main motivation of this space. It was an unfinished boat shed when we moved onto the property. So if I was to design my dream studio from scratch, it would be a lot more modest. But this, like thinking, ooh, my dream studio has high ceilings, and this really has high ceilings. I was thinking like 12 feet would be nice. This is like 18 to 24 foot ceilings.
Oh, wow.
And so it's amazing. So, but for the last year, that's taken a lot of my focus. I haven't produced as much art or done as many because I was painting in the spare bedroom of the house and then also managing the build of the studio. But now I feel like I've been painting in here for a week and I feel like I can get into a routine, and it's nice having it a little bit separate from the house. It's about a probably 65-second walk from the house, nice. Which is very pleasant through the woods. Nice. And so usually when I arrive to the studio, wherever that studio may be, but now it is here, I light a candle, I put on music, I might burn some incense or some sage or something that smells delicious and feels clearing and like it connects me in with the moment. And then I paint, and that's about it. Nice. I just paint, and sometimes I sing, and sometimes I listen to podcasts, and sometimes I have friends that drop by. But mostly it's just painting, and that is my practice. That's my medicine. That's my ritual. That's my deepest teacher, is just this process of surrender, of showing up, of listening, of taking risks, of doing the work and being willing to stay in that process.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
I wanted
it's
to,
deep and awesome.
I definitely wanted to get into teaching a little bit. I just, in my notes here, it just says, dash teaching as like one.
Good
but
question.
I didn't articulate it out into a question yet. But so you have that poem that I briefly mentioned earlier, and it's called "Art as a Teacher." Could you give us maybe like a couple highlights from that poem? And then this will percolate into your own teaching career. And one question that I'll save it for later. But I have a question now. Sorry.
Okay, I'll see if I can preempt it and answer it without you asking.
Yeah. Let's do that again.
Yeah. So, well, there's sort of, I guess there's two topics woven together here in your question, or in the idea itself, is the art as the teacher and the artist as the teacher. Mm-hmm. So I had been asked for years if I taught, years and years, and I would always say, no, I don't know what I'm doing, I just paint. But then if somebody asks me a question, a specific technical question, I can answer it at great length and with quite a bit of experience. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that I do have a wealth of knowledge that I've accumulated that I enjoy sharing. And in, I guess it was 2012, I met my friend Una, who has Bella Retreats.
I know
And
Una.
she, you know Una?
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Shouts,
Colorado
Una.
family.
Yeah.
Yeah. She and another friend, Heidi, in Costa Rica, they sort of cornered me in this loving way. And they said, we want you to teach. And we're going to arrange it all. Heidi was managing Salva Armonia Retreat Center, and Una was starting her Bella Retreats business. And they said, here's what's going to happen. We're going to make this happen a year from now. We'll handle all the registration. We'll handle all the logistics. You just show up and paint and talk to people about painting. And I was like, okay. And so we came up with the name Soul Portraits. And because I was like, oh yeah, it's like self-portraits, but like soul portraits, cool, okay. And it went great. And we learned so much in that first time. And I realized that I can just like go on and on about art. And I was able to break down my process into sort of a level playing field for people, regardless of their experience. So I've had people come to the retreats, and now we've done 8 of them. And then I've taught also in Europe at the Academy of Visionary Art, in Vienna, and in Italy at the Torre Superiore seminars, and at COSM, and then locally. And I've always find that regardless of people's experience, it comes down to just the willingness to stay in front of the easel is the biggest gift that you can give yourself and that you can give your creative process. And people amaze themselves at what they're capable of by just continuing to show up. And I give them every key I can possibly give them. I have no secrets in my creative process. I just lay it all out in as easy to understand and digest pieces as possible. I introduce all the same tools that I use. And I really just want to empower people to discover their own authentic style. And so I give them a lot of my tricks and treats all the way along the process. And it teaches them. You can study with the greatest painters in the world, and you can pick up some really great tools and techniques and perspectives, and it can teach you a lot, but there's no replacing the act of art making.
Right.
You can find the best bicycle rider in the world, and he can sit you there for hours. You could do like a 300-hour seminar of him explaining to you how to ride a bicycle. Like just right. Down to like from the physics, from the like directions and gravity and pedaling, but nothing at all will ever be as effective as you just getting on that bicycle and falling over a few times and learning where your balance is.
Yeah.
And learning about your motion and about your body and the new tools under you.
Yeah.
So the painting is the teacher, and it's the willingness to make mistakes. It's the willingness to mess up a pretty white canvas. It's the willingness to just keep on painting, and keep on moving forward and working through the inertia, working through the resistance, and keep going forward. And so that's why I think that the true blessing of these workshops and retreats and seminars is it's sort of this container that the students arrive in, and me as well. We arrive into this container where we're fed, where we're cleaned up after. It's just everything is taken care of. You're like a child in that way.
Yeah.
And we've got a few things like, a few extracurricular activities. But it's funny now working with Una for so many years, and she's awesome. She's just completely my perfect counterpart in that teaching, facilitating dance. And she'll like say, okay, here's your schedule for the week. Every day, okay, you get up, you eat, you paint, you eat, you paint, you eat, you either paint or you dance or you nap or whatever you want to do, you sleep, you eat, you paint. It just goes like that. And So with that container of like no laundry piling up and no kids demanding their lunches for school or whatever it is, no emails unless you have to, it creates this opportunity for you to listen to the creative process and find those places in your own creative process where you either need to show up more or cut yourself some slack. It really shows us how we're walking in the world of, do I need to take this more seriously or less seriously? And it's usually one or the other.
So important.
It's usually about finding your balance in there of like, okay, I have a tendency for perfectionism. That's cool. How can I also free myself from the chains of that?
Mm-hmm.
Or, I have a tendency of being flippant and giving up. Like I've had people who say, on the first day, I want a new canvas. I said, no. It's acrylic. You just paint over it if you don't like it. Like, keep on going. Keep moving forward. And so are you flippant? Do you quit easily? And therefore, do you need to take it a little bit more seriously? Do you need to follow through? Do you need to follow through in your relationships or in your job or in your home life or in your care of your children? Like, what is it that's demanding your attention that you're afraid to show up for?
Right.
And
I feel like creativity and painting, whatever it is, you're really working on yourself, right? Because you just mentioned all these other things besides painting that maybe the act of painting can sort of show you this trait about yourself that might need a little bit of work or might need a little bit of easing up on. Like you were talking about self-talk earlier and how we can actually, we can poison ourselves or heal ourselves via what we consume. I believe in that. And if you're consuming your own circular thoughts about, I'm not good enough, I need to perfect this painting, it's never, and you just get stuck in a cycle like that. And I think that, art is the teacher, like you were saying. So what have you learned about yourself through being creative and making art all these years? What kind of maybe what kind of stories have you let go of along your path, or what how have you changed?
I think it's an ongoing metamorphosis, really. It's hard to pinpoint because of the blessing in my life of always being able and encouraged to make art. That process has just always been there for me. So it's not really like there was this epiphany moment of breakthrough realization and shedding of some old self. It's really an ongoing refining and finessing of my inner landscape. It teaches me ongoing lessons on that showing up of doing the work, of surrendering, of trusting the process, of getting out of the way, of being diligent, of planning a little bit to save myself a lot of work later, while still staying open to the magic and to the wonder. We're taught from a very young age of what like the ideal American dream looks like, or North American dream. And so we might think, okay, by the time I'm 35, I want to be married with a white picket fence and 2.5 kids and a dog and a cat and yada, yada, yada. We have this very clear idea, that's the most like generic, quintessential one, but we might have these ideas. And even maybe it's on like a shorter term of like, this weekend, I'm going to like get out into the garden and I'm going to put all my beds to sleep for the winter and totally get prepped. And then maybe the weekend rolls around and your best friend really needs some support. And so you end up going for a hike, and then you get to the top of a mountain and you get to see this beautiful vista and you pick wild mushrooms on the way. And, it looks totally different.
Yeah.
And so that's that willingness to adapt, the willingness to listen and show up. And our painting process is the same way, in that if we can, have a direction, point in a certain direction, it's good to have plans.
Yeah.
but also be willing to make detours and be willing to listen. I think what it's really taught me about the idea of mistakes, this concept of accidents, is that, Bob Ross taught us all. He says,
Yeah, yeah.
there's no mistakes, there's just happy little accidents. And so, like, what is that mistake presenting to you? A mistake basically is a door being flung open and you being pushed to the threshold of it. And it's a door that you wouldn't even have reached for the handle if it hadn't have been flung and you pushed. So now, are you going to walk through the door? Or are you going to close the door, maybe start a new painting, get mad, do something else instead? So instead, like, let's walk through this door and see what's on the other side. And so often these mistakes can be incredible epiphanies if we allow them to be. They can be just awesome new aspects of a painting or a piece of music, or like, oops, I dumped cinnamon in my stew. Oh, actually, cinnamon and stew is super yummy. Great. Okay, moving forward. It's those kind of things. It's just being willing to stay open to the wonder, and that's what it continues to teach me. It teaches me that if I want to be really effective in my art practice, that I need to take care of my body vessel by eating well, sleeping well, keeping a level continence in level mental space. I need to be in a space that feels inspiring and it smells good and feels good and I'm warm. And I'm not really a fan of this like long suffering, starving artist
motif
thing. Like,
yeah.
I call myself a comfortunist, and it's not to say that I can't rough it. I spent 2 years growing up in tents while my parents built their house, and like, I've lived off the grid and I've camped a lot, and traveled and slept in my car, and like, I've done it, and I've lived in very humble little houses. But within that space, like, if I'm sleeping in my car, I'm going to like ball up some of my clothes and put them under my knees so that my back isn't in pain in the morning.
Right.
Or if I'm so tired that I'm falling into bed at night after doing an event, I'm still going to brush my teeth and get a glass of water beside my bed so that I can wake up and feel like part human.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to punish ourselves even further, or like put ourselves into even more discomfort, because then we're just sort of sidelining all the progress we've made, I think, to be able to be effective, to be able to operate in the world, to feel like, okay, I can clear the like distraction of discomfort away from me.
Yeah.
Unless it's something that really is demanding your attention.
Right.
You have some sort of body issue or relationships that are uncomfortable that need attention, of course.
Right.
But if you're cold while you're painting, put on a sweater.
Yeah.
Or like, get some slippers for your studio or something. Like, you don't have to be uncomfortable and be long suffering in order to be a glamorous romantic artist. It's not true.
I 100% agree.
And so take care.
Yeah. It even gets hard for me at festivals sometimes, where if they're in the fall or like the early spring where it's like really cold at night. Like, we painted at Red Rocks a few weeks ago, and it just got like so windy and cold, like during the night. I was like holding on to my canvas and like,
oh no.
Yeah. It was good times though. I had Randall there with me, and we were painting together, so that was actually ended up being kind of fun. But yeah, I want to drill down on that sleep thing a little bit and offer like my perspective on it. I didn't get it. I didn't get sleep. I didn't understand how important it was until, I don't know, 5 years ago. I'm 36, right? And like, I think all through my 20s, I was just like full rage, like 110% all the time. And I wasn't even painting until I was 26. So that first half was just like listless partying. And then even after that, I was like, well, if I'm going to stay up this late, like maybe I should like make something. But I just want to reiterate that that healthy rhythms are so important. And once I sort of figured out my sleep, and then once you can master sleep, and I know this is being sort of like echoed in the larger culture now, since we're all coming to terms with whatever our cultural neurosis around taking care of ourselves. But yeah, I just think once you can get your sleep rhythms down, your production, your productivity will go through the roof.
Yeah. Yeah, they've done studies in like the corporate world, right, where they either shorten the workday or they give like a nap period or a meditation period in the middle of the day. So you're actually diminishing the working hours, but they see the productivity go through the roof, and they're doing it in schools. And so if it works with corporate workers and children, then why wouldn't it work with us? And there's that, like, cutting yourself some slack, if needed. Or if you're finding that you're just like procrastinating and laying around and like watching TV all day, or like, maybe you need a little less sleep and a little bit more action, like find your medicine balance, whatever that is. But I definitely believe in taking care of your body so that it doesn't distract you and detour you from your purpose. If your purpose is to help inspire the world, then you don't want something annoying like
cold feet.
Cold feet, or like a bad back or something. Like gotta like eat well and sleep and like just take care. Drink water. I have like a bell I ring when I'm teaching. I'm like, drink water and like sit up straight, like move your easel. I need to learn from my own advice, but just really just do the easy things so that you can be more effective and you can paint even more into, like, I want to paint until the day I die, and I want to live until I'm 100. And so if I want to rise to that, then I need to take care. And I definitely, any second now, I'm going to start a yoga practice. I promise.
I mean, all I do is like, I mean, it's pretty just elementary, like 10 minutes every morning, but it just does something for me. I don't know what it is. Like, I get a lot of soreness out, and I get, I align my spine in this way so that I can just sort of, it's just easier to check in with yourself, and you actually know when you're tired, and you know when you can push it. I just I just find it like a nice little, it's a tool to just be more present with your own body.
I think that's probably one of my shortcomings, is that I have this like productivity mind, that like, even though I know intellectually that yoga is good for me and I enjoy it every time I do it, I love it, but it's like I don't have something tangible to show for it after.
Yeah.
And so, like, I've only just in the last few years learned how to watch a movie without multitasking, like assembling greeting cards at the same time or signing prints at the same time. So because it's not this like commodity, it's not this productivity thing, it's really hard for me to prioritize it.
Yeah.
It's, and so, but I know it intellectually, and I know that it's something that would be really helpful for me. But I've also been I've pretty strong constitution. Like, my physical body is pretty healthy.
Yeah.
And I come from like both my parents pretty healthy in that way. My dad has passed now, but like very healthy lifestyles and healthy bodies. And so I haven't had to, like, it's that whole thing, like, make time for your health now, otherwise you'll be forced to make time for it later, or make time for your disease later. And so I know that it's like a preventative thing, but it's also hasn't been this like knocking on my door of like, take care of this, it's not a priority yet. kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
literally any second, maybe after this chat, I'll get my mat out. You'll
Yeah.
inspire me.
Yeah. I think it was because when I was like probably 23 or 24, my girlfriend at the time got me this gift certificate to what was then called Bikram yoga
Mm-hmm.
spot. So it was like a month long, just you could go for free. So I went for 28 out of the 30 days of that month to this hot
Great.
yoga thing. And like by the middle of that month, I was just on fire, like all the time, just like super present and just without a care in the world kind of thing. Um, and just, knowing the reality of what people call chi, or what, if you're if you're more science minded, you could call biological energy, but like just really, really feeling that. Um,
Hmm.
but anyways, this isn't a podcast about yoga, but I want to come back to what did I want to come back to? Oh yeah, so we were talking about teachers. You being a teacher, um, first of all, and then art, of course, art being a teacher. I want to know, did you have any real life art mentors, or really any kind of mentor? It could be business, could be, um, spiritual, or just anyone along your path who sort of showed you something and gave you kind of a direction.
Hmm. Not specifically.
Hmm.
Like I mentioned, my parents and my family. My mom has always been like my greatest cheerleader. She's also my most honest critic. So she's
Really
really helpful in
nice.
in picking pieces apart. She loves to help name paintings. She loves to like brainstorm or troubleshoot compositional issues or that kind of thing. She just gets a kick out of it, and she's got a really good perspective. My art teacher in high school, as I mentioned, was he's I know, just arts. You talk about high school and you just start like falling asleep.
No, I mean, I hate it when this
High school.
happens.
Oh God.
No,
Don't worry. I'm
I
kidding.
just, it's just a physiological response. I yawned
It's
for
good. Get
anyone
that
listening.
oxygen.
Yeah,
Get
yeah.
it. Sorry to shine a
No, that
spotlight.
was funny.
So yeah, my high school art teacher, I think just in his trust and faith in me and his like untethering of control really encouraged me to view the art as my own teacher, and really to just experiment and play and get to know different mediums. So I'd say those are like some pretty big mentors. My uncle, when I was a really young kid, he was an amazing artist. He died when I was, I think, like 8. But I remember like sitting with him at the cottage and him teaching me how to draw a sun umbrella, and that kind of like perspective, and
Yeah.
that was really neat. And um, there's been a lot of great little tricks along the way and awesome cheerleaders, but nobody that's really, I wouldn't say there's been a mentor that's stuck with me or that I've stuck with. That it's just art has been my mentor. It's been my focus and my greatest teacher, because I've also moved around quite a bit, and um, I really am resistant being told what to do.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I really like. I mean, that's an artist thing, but I just like. Yeah, I don't like that. So I really just like to. Like I remember even as a kid asking my mom, like, "Mama, what should I draw?" And she'd be like, "Draw a hippopotamus." I'm like, nah, and draw a person. And I would like, but just like having her tell me to draw something that I didn't want to draw helped fuel what
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
want to do. So maybe that was helpful. I don't know. It's yeah, I think just the art itself, and then just being exposed to art. I just love going to museums and art galleries and
Yeah.
looking closely. It's fun to like go to a museum and you can always tell who the artists are because they're right up to the canvas like this, and they're like looking at, you're looking at Rembrandt's brush strokes, like, what the,
Yeah.
how does he do that? It's so cool. And So yeah, other people stand back and look like this, and artists are just like, I want to see that brush stroke and how it's laid down. What direction did he use?
Yeah. I went to, my parents were in town a few months ago, and I took them to the Denver Art Museum, and there's a bunch of Monets there. And there's this one, it's like a winter scene, but you get up close and it's like little specks of like ultraviolet and yellow, and it creates this crazy iridescent thing. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
I mean, like right, right here. And I had someone, they had to be like, "Sir, you need to step
Yeah.
back a little bit."
Or the alarms go off.
That's never embarrassing. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Like, it's kind of like just your life experience has sort of been your own mentor, and that's really unique. Cool. So yeah, we're at about an hour and 40 minutes so far. I want to ask you just a few more questions, and then we'll wrap this up. But I kind of want to focus on the future, and I know we've talked about plans versus sort of flowing and feeling your way through things. But do you have a dream project or desire to do any sort of bigger or better? Maybe we don't have to use those as qualifiers, but like, do you have a dream project for the future at all?
Well, bringing the studio to fruition has definitely been a dream come true. It's such a beautiful space, and it's a space that I'm really excited to be able to welcome students into and welcome art community into. And it's in a beautiful place on the Sunshine Coast, and so it's a lovely sanctuary. So that's very exciting. We also, on this land, would like to have a small scale retreat center. So that's sort of a grander creative vision. I'm quite content not traveling for the time being. I've traveled a lot in the last, especially in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. But last winter was the first winter in 19 years that I didn't take an international trip somewhere.
Wow.
And in 2019, I think I flew like 9 times internationally, and it was just too much. Mm-hmm. For many reasons, like amazing, and I'm so grateful for it. But now I'm quite happy to just dig into this land and really cultivate the studio space. And the studio is big, so I'm excited to paint on some big paintings and work on some multi-figure pieces and see where they go, and explore bigger brush strokes and see what happens with that. Nice. I'm working on designing a coffee table book right now. Oh, cool. I'm working with Blue Angel Publishing, who I've worked with a couple times in the past, and they've been awesome. They're out of Australia, and so they've given me the green light. We discussed it and did all the contracts last year, and they've given me the green light this month to let's start moving forward on it. So I've been designing it right down to every page, and it's going to include about 10 years worth of art. It'll be about 120 pages, and have some writing in it as well. So that's really exciting. That's been something that's been on my to-do list for many years. Nice. And each new painting I've done, I've thought, oh, good thing I didn't do my book yet, because I want this piece to be in it. So, but sooner or later, you got to just sort of call it and and let it out. Already, I've got like a few sort of placeholder pages in the design of the book. I'm like, this is a painting I'm planning for December. That really excites me. And I recently acquired a cello, so I'm excited to learn to play some cello.
Wow, nice.
I've always wanted to learn it, and it looks really beautiful in my studio at the very least. And at the very most, I'd like to rock out, because there's plenty of girls and guitars out in the world, and so I want to be a girl with a cello.
Nice.
And
that's so rad.
Yeah, it's really fun. And maybe more.
Sorry, you cut out there for just a second. Maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Did you?
I'd like to maybe do some more music collaborations.
Okay, sweet.
I did a song with Isaac Chambers last year, which was really fun. And I did one with David Block for The Human Experience quite a few years ago, way back. And that was also really fun. So yeah, that's always been a passion. It's always taken the back burner to my art. So I feel like the time is coming for music to sort of step up again.
Nice.
And yeah, I think that's, just ongoing. I put in a garden last year for the first time in 15 years, and that just felt really good. So that's sort of a new creative expression as well.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of work. Wow.
Yeah.
I think there was I didn't paint for 2.5 months over planting and prepping season. So
did you get a good harvest out of that?
Decent, but we're new on this land as of a year ago, so learning the sun and where the good spots for what. So yeah, definitely learned a lot and ate a lot of good food, and there's still lots of greens in there. It's pretty temperate here on the Sunshine Coast, so we'll get greens most of the winter out of the garden, of the sort of winter greens and that kind of thing. So
awesome.
It's good in that way. Epic raspberry patch.
Sweet. So yeah, usually I close out and ask what advice you would give to younger artists. And I know you've dropped so much insight here, and I'm really grateful for that. But if you could close on, maybe you could give your younger self some advice. What would you give that younger self?
There's probably a few things, and maybe not specifically to me, because I definitely acknowledge the privilege that I sit in with having been encouraged in my art path. And I acknowledge that that's not normal. Most people have trauma around art making in some way. And most people were told not to in some way. And if it's at a young enough age that they were told not to by various voices in their life, they've probably internalized that voice, and it's become their own voice, and they can't differentiate where that came from. And so they just think, I'm bad at art. And that's just how it is. So operating from that perspective and speaking to those children, or the children within the adults now that might be interested in pursuing art to whatever degree, I'd say number one is just play and have fun, and just cut yourself some slack. Really find your perfect balance, your medicine point in that duality, or in that paradox of take it serious enough to follow through, to take it serious enough that you're going to sit down with some art supplies and make some art and not just procrastinate on it, but hold it loosely enough that you're not going to hinge your self-worth on whether you can accurately depict the multidimensional fractal of your vision onto the paper in half an hour. It's so simple, but it's so important to remember that art takes time. It takes a lot of time. And if you want something to really be detailed and accurate and meticulous, it's going to take a really lot of time, so much dedication. And so being willing to go on that journey, being willing to not like your art at some parts of the process, being willing to sit with it regardless of whether you like it or not, or whether it looks like you wanted it to look, being really open to the mystery of what that art is becoming, rather than demanding it to be something that you think it should be. So like your weekend that you had planned, that totally got derailed by another need, really be open to it looking completely different. And maybe your style even looks completely different than you think it's going to look, because we all go to museums or we see art online and we think that's impressive, that's beautiful, I love that art, that must be what good art looks like. And then inevitably we sit down at the kitchen table with our, our new sketchbook, and we're like, I'm going to make some art that looks like that.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't look like that.
Right.
Because only you can make art that looks like you, like your art. And only that person can make art that looks like their art. So really being willing to be surprised by your own style is so key. And it's okay to mimic and experiment and learn from other people's styles, but really allowing your own style to shine through. So we gather tools from other artists, but don't stop there. If you see somebody on the dance floor and they do this cool arm move that you like, you can try to emulate that, but don't stop there.
Yeah.
Keep going. And how can you now make that your own?
Right.
It's about adapting. It's about culture, and culture, the whole purpose and definition of culture is to grow and evolve and to spread and to transform. And so allow that in your own art making. Also, I'd say for young artists or beginner artists, just because you love making art does not mean that it needs to be your career. We do our art and ourselves a great disservice when we start putting demands on it that it needs to pay our bills. And then it ceases to be fun and playful and experimental and cathartic, and it becomes a chore and a job and something we need to commodify. And by all means, if you have the mind for that, and if people are want to buy your work, let that be a natural progression. But to start out and say, okay, this is I'm going to be an artist and it's going to support me, and you quit your job and you take that leap of faith, that's very brave.
Right.
But you're also making demands on your creativity, that creativity in its most fundamental, innate essence is an unleashed wild beast. And all of a sudden you're give it a poodle haircut and put it on a leash and paint its toenails, and you say, okay, now you're going to do what I tell you to do.
Yeah.
It's no way, I'm out of here. And you might find that your inspiration will leave in that way if we start putting too many demands. And so if you do feel like you want to transition to that, I would suggest maybe see if you can take your serving job or your accounting job or whatever it is, see if you can go down to 3 days a week. So you have another 3 days to make art, and then you have a day that you still have to take off, or something. Find a balance that you can create space and time in your life to make your art, but that you're still getting some income. This whole don't quit your day job thing. I think it's there's something to that. Yeah. Don't quit your day job 100%. Or don't quit your night job or whatever it is, but don't keep working. If you do want to dedicate time and you do want to have this become a way of life, you have to quit part of it. So you still do need to make some leap of faith, because if you're working 40-hour week or more, you're not going to have much time or energy to make art, and art takes time and energy.
Yeah.
So it's sort of this balance point, but really take your time in making it a career move. But then when you do, or if you do, let it happen organically and reach out. There's a lot of expertise and a lot of ask people for help. I've got some little Instagram videos that I answer a lot of business questions. You can find them if you scroll way back. Mm-hmm. And that's can be helpful. There's tons of articles online. There's forums. There's just find it. I've got some Q&A on my website. There's lots of tried and true things you can do, and lots of wisdom that other people have gleaned, and you can really sort of cut to the chase to a certain extent. Yeah. But mostly it comes down to do it so it's still fun.
100%. Yeah.
I don't personally do commissions because it turns it into a chore.
Right.
And then I end up it takes me way longer. I end up not really liking it because it's somebody else's vision. I can't listen to my own intuition and go off on a tangent.
Right.
And then I'm not pleased with it at the end, so I want to charge less, and then they're not happy because it doesn't look like my other work. So it's just like, I learned years and years and years ago, don't do that.
Yeah.
And so I just don't do that.
Yeah, my rule for commissions is 5 words or less, and I'll do my best.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, sweet. That is really solid advice, and I'll echo that and just say, I know I've said it a bunch on this podcast, I'm sure, but I quit my day job too early. Like, I'd been painting for a year and a half or something, and I actually quit it to go to the Torrey Superiore retreat. I was like, I can take this vacation, right? And they were like, I was like, see ya. In hindsight, I'm really glad that I went to Italy. I think I made the right move. So forget everything I just said before that. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, you need to have a little bit of income if you're just starting out. You need to have something else, or else you get. I found myself afterwards being stressed and just like, for a couple months there, like going full wook mode. But yeah, I think that once you are disciplined enough and you've had enough experience, and you don't necessarily have to treat it like a job, but you need to treat it like some kind of devotional thing where you're there most days. And yeah, so I just wanted to echo that. Thank you for that awesome advice.
Yeah, and in that time too, like, you need to organically build an audience. That doesn't just immediately happen just because you look at some successful painter that's painting at the same festival that you happen to be painting at, and you're like, sweet, they're like making a go of it, and they're teaching. They've got like online workshops and selling. Like, you can't just start from no audience,
right?
And so knowing that happens over time, it really takes a lot of diligence and patience, and then also just really, if you're painting for what you think sells, you're like, okay, well, kittens and sunsets are really in, so I'm going to paint a kitten in front of a sunset. And so you're painting what you think is going to sell. Or like, okay, the whatever skulls are in right now, I'm going to paint some skulls. That's cool. People are into it. But if that's not what is authentic and inspired by you, people won't actually even notice it. I believe that when people connect with my work, it's because they connect with the authenticity that is coming through my work.
Yeah.
It's because there's, like, if you believe in the like spiritual imprinting, or like the idea that there is an imprint on everything that's created that's energetic. So if you taste food, you ever see that movie, like Water for Chocolate? Like an old Mexican movie, amazing. But it's like this idea of like this woman, her beloved is marrying her sister. So she's making the wedding cake at their wedding, and she's sobbing into the wedding cake. And then they serve it at the wedding after the ceremony, and everybody's eating the cake and sobbing. So that kind of thing. It's right. You can feel if somebody put love into something. Like, maybe you can't feel it in like a toaster oven or something like that necessarily, but you can feel it in food if somebody loves it. Like, can, if and something can be delicious and they can be cranky when they made it, and sure. But if you're moved by something, like I feel like if you're moved by one of my paintings, that means that I was successful in getting out of the way.
Yeah, you did your job.
The better it is, the less I can take credit for it. So that's what people respond to. That's what people connect with, because they stand in front of that painting and it becomes a mirror to their own authenticity. And that's what they're moved by. They're moved by their own existence, by their own perception and their own stories that they embed into the authenticity of the painting. So if you're just painting a kitten in front of a sunset because you think, like, unless you love kitten in front of a sunset, and people will be like, oh my God, I didn't know that I need this painting. I need this painting. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And like, I'm moved by it. But paint what comes through. Paint what makes you feel alive. Don't just paint you know, whatever. I can give a lot of examples, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Don't just paint what you think is like trendy at the festival scene, because that's what so-and-so is painting down the way from you.
Yeah.
Paint what's inspiring to you. It doesn't matter what it is.
Right. Yeah. And I think for me personally, like the best way to do that is just to like throw paint on the canvas at first, then in as thin layers as I can manage at first, and then just mess around, because like your organism holds that, it holds the truth, it holds that authenticity. And if you just mess around long enough, you'll have your own style. You know, you'll have something that's uniquely yours.
And then it'll change.
Yeah, and then that will change. And then that's the beauty of it too. I love artists whose style changes every, 5-10 years or something like that. Like, Picasso had all those periods he went through, and I think about like recording artists like David Bowie or I just dig that, style to style, but it's still uniquely theirs. And Well, anyway, thank you so much for all your wisdom and your insights, and for sharing time and energy with me here today. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Oh, you too, Andrew. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Autumn. So tell people where they can find you. We can do YouTube, website, all that.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Autumn Skye Art. That's SKYE, like the island. You can find me on Facebook as well, Autumn Skye Art. My website, surprise, autumnskyeart.com. YouTube the same, and there are videos forthcoming. You can find me on Patreon, and I think that's it. I've not jumped on the whatever,
TikTok.
the Twitter or the TikTok. I couldn't even remember it. Like, that's how much I don't want to be on it. It's like
Right.
I honestly,
Yeah,
I have not jumped on that because I want less time on social media.
100%.
Even though I sort of missed the boat on Instagram, I got on it a little late, so I've had to really organically grow my audience there. And so I'm hoping I'm not also missing the boat on the inevitable TikTok revolution that
Well, you got to
don't
take
really wanna.
a ton of videos for TikTok.
Yeah, and then you got to like edit and like overlay, and you like point at words.
I
Like,
hate that.
Just can't. I can't be bothered.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Cool.
So instead, I'm just going to keep on keeping on Instagram is sort of my main spot that I try to share almost once a day, sometimes a couple times a day, and sometimes not for a few days. And then, which gets shared to Facebook and all that jazz. But mostly just, I also have on my website, you can find a newsletter which has my updates of new paintings and workshops and retreats and those kind of things.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the beautiful podcast, Autumn. And yeah, once again, great talking with you. I'd love to have you back on at some point. And hopefully we'll catch up in real life sometime soon.
Yeah, come on up to BC if you're inspired to travel up the coast. And I would love to spend some time in Colorado too. I feel like BC and Colorado are sort of like
same vibe,
separated at birth, kind of twins. There's really a similarity there. And even in the landscape, we got the ocean, but then you've got the red rocks. So we can maybe trade a little bit for a little bit.
Yeah.
But a really similar community as well. And some of my favorite people in the whole world live down that way. So it's really, one day I'll be down there soon.
Sweet. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again for listening to another episode of Artsy AF Podcast. If you are interested in supporting the Patreon, that address is patreon.com/Artsy AF Podcast. And I want to thank all my patrons. You guys keep this engine running. I couldn't do it without you. Go over there and check out the tiers I have available. It includes video, guest suggestions, patron-only posts, and some merchandise. Thank you again for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe. Do all those little things that help get Artsy AF into the consciousness of more and more people. Shout.